for listening to Don't Walk Into Traffic, the podcast where we talk about what's happening, what's coming, and how we're getting through it. My name is Patty, and I'm here with my friend Jeremy. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm good, Patty. I wondered if you forgot who I was for a second there.
I just kind of forgot what I was saying.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay. Yeah.
it's been a very long week.
Yeah, it has. Well, I'm still here. I'm still Jeremy. And yeah, I would agree. It's been a strange week. Well, I guess it was a short week, and we're in the midst of another short week. And maybe that's, before we came on here, we were talking about how it was kind of weird. Maybe the first time since we started doing this to kind of find like, I don't know, some passionate topics we want to discuss. And it feels pretty weird to kind of not have an, what do they call that? An iron rod? That's not the right word. Sorry, what am I saying?
What are you trying
I don't
to
know.
say?
Like I'm trying to say like a big, I don't know what. Anyway, transition. How are you?
Well, good news is I had a very minor surgery on Thursday and I am cancer free. So
Yay!
that's good news.
Yay,
Applause
that's
all the way
great
around.
news.
Also, I feel like every weekend should be a 5-day weekend.
Yes.
And I'm really struggling with the fact that the next one won't be.
Did most people you think either take or get a 5-day weekend? Or wait a minute.
I would have had a 3-day weekend regardless because of Memorial Day tomorrow.
Yes.
But I did take off Thursday and Friday as well. So, and then I was like, every day. Now, tomorrow is Sunday. No, I'm sorry. Today is Sunday. Tomorrow is Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to go back to work the day after tomorrow, and it's already stressing me out.
Yeah.
Because I've had 4 days of not having to worry about it.
You have the Sunday scaries for Tuesday workday.
I opened my laptop and it says I have like 75 emails waiting for me, and I'm not looking at them until Tuesday. So
yeah.
That's fun.
I hope you had surgery, but did you do anything else fun for your 5 days, or did you?
I did not. I got a handle on some housework I've been trying to get. I ended up having to have a much more minor procedure after doing some like repeat testing than I had planned. So like I probably could have gone to work on Friday, but I certainly wasn't going to. I'd already taken the time off. And like there's this little part of me that thinks maybe I'll still be recovering Tuesday. I don't know yet.
Right.
Sorry guys, I got to work from home today. I don't want to put on real pants anymore ever again.
Yeah, I just like flashed at like the person who had like a more conservative surgery and feels really good and is like, you know what? I think I'm going to go back in and take that day I took off. I'm actually going to go in. And I just like, I'm really glad you're not that person. And most people.
Listen, it was a moral, it was a mental debate. I also had a different doctor's appointment already scheduled for Friday. So I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to stay home.
Fair.
Because it was right in the middle of the day.
I think like becoming cancer free is probably reason enough to maybe take a little time for yourself.
You would think, but the world stops for no one. The grand world of high-end home remodeling stops for no one.
Right.
Judging by the fact like my work phone it finally died. Otherwise it would still be going off. I'm just not going to charge it until Tuesday morning.
You'd still get like calls about like cabinets being pirated on ships in the South Asian Sea.
That is still like it was my biggest post ever.
Have we ever talked about that on here?
I don't think so. So last year I was having a terrible couple of days at work, so I decided to take a mental health day. And it was supposed to be an actual mental health day. Like, I'm not logging into a computer. I'm not doing anything. And instead, I get a frantic phone call from one of our countertop suppliers. And I'm like, hey, what's up? What's going on? Like, because it wasn't just one call that I ignored. It was like 4 calls in rapid succession. At which point, my rep from that countertop company says, I have really bad news for you. And I was like, okay, what's wrong? And she said, ex-client, countertops, were in transit across the ocean because all countertops except for Cambria are imported. And Turns out the ship got hijacked by pirates. So then I had to call the client and say, hey, so and so, I am so sorry to tell you this. There's going to be a delay in your countertops because they are, in fact, being held hostage by pirates right now.
I love that.
It was one of the most fun days I've ever had on Twitter because it's just such a weird, crazy story.
It is.
Like right now, I have tile that's from Italy that's delayed because of all of the tariffs and stuff, which is not nearly as fun as boat hijacked by pirates.
Yeah, no, that's not. You're right. It's so funny. First of all, it seems like that was like a long time ago, and it was only last year.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, I've never had a viral post. I think the most numbers I ever did is I got like 300 likes, and I don't know if I got reposted a whole lot. This is like in 2019 maybe or 18. And the post was simply the best drone track I've heard this year is my cat licking itself. And I sometimes wonder if I did that again today on like Blue Sky, I'd probably get like 6 likes. The game has stepped up quite a bit online too. So
I've had a couple go,
yeah,
but that was for sure the biggest one.
that one for me was one where like that just came, like I was on Twitter and like that just came up and I read it and I didn't realize it was you until it got bigger. And then I was like, holy shit, that's Patty. So that one was funny in that way where, yeah, it makes me miss, um, those are the times that I miss that site. They're rare,
Yeah.
but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not getting better lately for
So
sure.
I've heard. Yeah.
When it functions at all, it's still a cesspool.
Yes. Yeah.
Apparently, the rules are you can have timeline, notifications, or DMs. You can have two of the three at any time, but you can never have all three.
Really?
Because that's what happened. DMs went down for an entire day, and then notifications stopped working, and then the timeline just died.
I can't imagine that site like going any lengthy amount of time with notifications being down. Like the how much serotonin that sucks out of the entire like universe.
Yes. I'm sitting here going like, oh, okay, now I have to click on my profile, click on every individual post to read what people are saying. And like to see who liked it, I've got to go click on the little like a post interactions thing. And it's just getting more cumbersome to use. So yeah, it's not great on that site. But if I leave it, what's gonna happen? If I leave it, like maybe I'm the one who will save it. I'm not.
Right.
Maybe I'll miss something really important. Listen, there are gonna be a few days that are gonna happen in our, you know, hopefully relatively immediate future that you're gonna want to be on Twitter for.
Uh, you might have to count me out.
I don't know, man. Donald Trump's not gonna live forever.
Uh,
Do you remember, because you were still on there, do you remember when Donald Trump got COVID
yeah.
and how fun Twitter was for like 3 days?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Listen, he kicks it. Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is like decaying in front of our eyes.
This is a really good segue into what we're going to talk about. I didn't. Did you do this on purpose?
No, because I don't even know how it's a good segue yet. I'm
Oh,
still
you
getting
don't?
there.
Oh, well, I'm sure we'll cover. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so like you said, it was kind of a struggle to find like really powerful stories this week. Also, I want to apologize to America for apparently jinxing our big, beautiful budget bill because it ended up passing the House.
Well, okay. What? Okay.
Well, when we talked last week,
Right.
it had died in committee. They brought it back
Oh,
and
yeah,
it passed the House.
I see. Yeah.
So I was very excited last week that it wasn't going to pass, and then it did. And something that I don't know that today is the right day to address it. I think today we're going to have maybe a little bit more fun with things.
Yes.
But the elephant in the room with that is that the Democratic Party has had 3 sitting members of the House of Representatives die of old age this term.
Correct.
We lost that by 1 vote.
Yes. Is that the 2 absent votes? So absent. I'm doing in quotes, right?
Yes, like if we would have had 2 of those 3 people still alive, we would have stopped that bill.
Yeah. I have a side note on that also, kind of, that is non-related to people dying and not being able to vote, but yeah, that is true.
So all of the terrible things we talked about last week, I'm not going to rehash a single one of them because I don't want to deal with it right now, to be quite honest.
Fair enough.
That's future us's problem.
You're on your 5-day weekend, girl.
I am on my 5-day weekend. I've got tacos to make later.
Dang.
Like,
you know, speaking of this being Memorial Day weekend, I'm at home after being up at the family cabin for a couple days. And I'm really excited because I'm here alone and the house is quiet. And just how clueless I am is that for the last 2 days, I was like, Sunday night, I'm going to Big Red's Pizzeria out here in Colbert, Washington. I'm going to get myself one of those Wrigley Field calzones.
oh, hell
Of
yeah.
course, they're not open on Memorial Day weekend.
Oh,
Oh,
bummer.
I know.
Speaking of Wrigley Field,
Yes.
calzones,
Mm,
Cubs just beat Cincinnati in the series.
okay.
They pulled it out at the last second today and won 11-8. And as an Ohioan, as a transplant Ohioan, anytime it happens so rarely because all of our sports teams in Chicago suck.
Mm,
But it's nice to beat the locals every once in a while.
absolutely. It's a good year here in Seattle, well, in the state of Washington, as a Mariners fan too, because they are playing very well and they will probably eventually break our hearts as they usually do. And there's so many interesting, we didn't even talk about the Oscar, think about talking about the Oscar Wienermobile races. Did you see those?
I did not see
Oh, well, that's
those.
probably why we didn't talk about it. We'll probably have to cut this transition because there is no transition. So, um, I did want to say on baseball one quick thing because you mentioned Wrigley Field, and I watched this thing last night on that show Pablo Torre Finds Out.
Yeah.
And long story short, they had on this guy. His grandson told Pablo Torre about him, and he's a 86-year-old who plays the video game Major League Baseball, the show, and plays 162 games per year. Anyway, he plays like full major league seasons as the New York Yankees, and he keeps score by hand at home. And
Wow.
he's been doing this for a decade, and it's an incredible, weird combination of like the past with the future.
I think honestly, what we should do is we should have more old people doing weird shit like that and not being in Congress.
I would agree with that. Okay, good transition. Never mind.
So, the story that I found this week that was like, hey, seems like we could be using our time better, maybe, is that Senator Angela Paxton, state senator in Texas, who is also State Attorney General Ken Paxton, notorious for fraud, his wife, is on a personal quest to ban masturbation in the state of Texas. Which, I mean, I'm very, very pro what happens in your bedroom, or as long as it's not happening on the subway, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I feel like Texas has other things. Don't they still have an electrical grid they have to fix?
Yes.
So her proposed bill that was filed this week would require online shoppers to submit photo identification before purchasing a sex toy. Senate Bill 3003 claims to home in on the protection of minors by regulating the online sale of obscene devices to those under 18. According to the Texas Penal Code, an obscene device is qualified as a device including a dildo or artificial vagina designed or marketed as useful primarily for the stimulation of human genital organs. First of all, I think any ER doctor will tell you, based on the amount of things they pull out of human anuses, that anything can be a sex toy if you try hard enough.
True.
Like, this is absolutely, obviously ridiculous. First of all, what if you don't have a photo ID, but you're an adult?
No dildo for you, apparently. So yeah, I feel like there's two things at issue here, right? Is there's the idea that these things need to be sold to adults and not children.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is what is Texas doing for, say, the actual sexual exploitations of children or children who are victims of sexual assault, or educating children about, and obviously this is probably not a Texas thing, but contraception, other than like any sort of morality police type bullshit? What is the danger of a person under the age of 18 buying a dildo?
There is none. There is none. And so you touched on something that was really the reason I wanted to talk about this. Because yes, it's silly and no one expects anything sane to come out of Texas anymore. It's the Florida of the West. Sorry to anyone who lives in Texas or Florida. I'm sure you're lovely. Your states suck. And I say this as someone who lives in Ohio. Like, I'm allowed to.
Right. Fair.
But there are certain things tied in with sexual health that things like sex toys, but specifically masturbation in general, help. I can't speak as a man because I'll leave that to you here in a second. But as a woman, there are kind of two things that you take from that. One is what is okay to do to your body. And I don't just mean in a, oh, this is something that gives me pleasure kind of way. When you learn about your body and how it works, you are able to then control how other people care for your body, whether they be sexual partners, whether you find that certain things end up frightening you or turning you on or whatever those things may be. When you learn those like as a normal part of teenagership, which, you know, I mean, every sitcom I can think of that has kids in it is, for as long as I've been alive, has a, oh, you know, little Jimmy won't get out of the bathroom joke. So it's not like this is a new thing. It's not like kids are exploring their bodies more. There are just more ways to do it. And knowing what makes you feel good helps you know what makes you feel bad. And so you can say, listen, please don't do that. It does not make me feel good. And that is how you start to establish boundaries for consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I got to tell you, reading stories about kind of what the young men are turning into, that is an incredibly important thing that young girls, young women understand now, is like how to police how other people treat their bodies. The other thing, I can't help but think, because you know me, conspiracy theory alarm going off. Texas is fine.
Conspiracy, woo, woo, woo. Last week I did it was way too loud.
It was very loud.
Sorry about that,
car.
everybody.
Texas doesn't care if it's 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds having babies. They just want babies, particularly white babies. And so, like you said, they don't teach about contraception. They teach about abstinence. But anyone who's been a teenager or an adult knows that there are certain like just drives that you have within you that sometimes you can't control. And so when you're dating someone for 6 months and you're 17 or 15 or whatever, and you end up having sex, but you don't have access to contraception, like that's your option. You don't have the option under these policies to just take care of it yourself. And I find that very scary. The article that we'll link talks a lot about how this affects women, but it doesn't just affect women. There are things that men purchase to help aid in the process.
Sure.
And those would go away as well. And I'm sorry, horny teenagers should have an outlet.
Yeah.
And when they don't, young women will get hurt and young men will throw their lives away. That to me is like the worst part of it. You know, even if Ohio did that, I'm of age, who cares? Also, these are also ways to create registries. You think that data is just going to go away? You have to submit your driver's license through a third party security organization. So I'm not just giving my driver's license to Adam and Eve, I'm doing it through a third party. Now that third party is compiling all of that data. And there are some things that, let's say, trans people would purchase, gay people would purchase specifically. And because of that, like now, the things that you're purchasing are ending up on a list.
Right.
And that's terrifying because as we continue to morality police everything down into this weird Christo-fascist nightmare, that's going to be part of it. Like that's how you eliminate gay people. It's how you eliminate anyone sex positive, because that's a danger to them. Because if you're sex positive, you know your body, you know what you will and you won't accept. And then you know how to take care of it. You know how to engage in contraception, etc.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. And I would say that the thing I can't get away from, like trying to dial it back a little bit, is on this particular issue with this particular woman, there seems to be like everything, if you're reading between the lines, seems to suggest sex and pleasure are like that pleasure is not part of this so-called what is moral conversation. It's almost like,
No, Jeremy, sex is for making babies only.
I would think a lot of people who live in Texas, who may even be conservative, would probably have some pretty big pushback on the idea of the government regulating how pleasurable your lovemaking is.
So the motives behind it are to make it so sex is not viewed as a pleasurable act, that it is for husbands to impose upon their wives and to procreate. And that's it. That is all these people want. I like to think they just want there to be no joy in the world, period. But also, they want to control and subjugate women because they want women to have babies. It's amazing how much of the current state of everything is a result of declining birth rates. And I'm not saying they don't deserve it. Like, make my life easier and I'll pop out a couple of kids. But I can't afford to have children and there's no support system. And now they just passed a bill that's going to, at least in the House, that's going to make it even more difficult.
Well, and I think that gets like at the whole thing is that everything is about biting your tail off anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
There's no cohesive thought to any of this in terms of let's have more kids, let's have kids eat less. Like none of this makes any sense. I don't even understand. I struggle to come to an understanding of how you can be supportive of things. I said this last week at the AI thing, and I listened back to it and I was like, how are people going to ban porn and like empower AI deep fakes at the same time? And the reality is you said, is they don't know what it is. And in this case, I don't know how you can say they don't know what it means when it means pop out more kids, but it's going to be harder to raise them. I don't, that is beyond my cognitive sightseeing, so to speak.
There is no ethical consistency.
There's none.
There's no moral consistency. They can't even say, well, this is the Christian thing to do, because anyone who's ever picked up a fucking Bible ever in their entire life, earmuffs children, is going to understand that the things that they are saying and doing to other people are not Christian. They're not what Jesus would have done. Jesus didn't care if you jerked off. Jesus paraded around with the worst of people, because that's our job as humans, is to help make better the worst and to do the least amount of harm. And eh, the GOP doesn't care about that. They have very wealthy friends and they are very wealthy, and they all think they should be more wealthy and more powerful. And that's all this is. At the end of the day, every single dumb regulation they throw down the chute, whether it be eliminating protections against deep fakes, whether it be banning sex toys, is all about the consolidation of wealth and power for men. That's all it is.
We kind of looped around here because on this big, beautiful bill, I was looking at this, and this is from, oh gosh, where did it go? My cat was playing around on the keyboard again.
Oh, yeah.
It's so weird. I cannot believe how much fucking destruction this cat can do by just like taking a nap on my computer.
My old boss, her granddaughter, had her laptop one day, and they ended up having to replace the laptop because even like the Apple geniuses could not figure out what she had done to it.
I love that. Uh, this is from Data for Progress, and it was dated on May 22nd. And prior to the passage of this bill, they conducted a series of surveys for voters across the country in all congressional districts in regards to SNAP funding. Nationwide, 44% of voters want Congress to increase funding for food assistance. 39 wanted funding to be kept as is, and only 11% wanted to cut funding.
Like I said last week, there is not a district in the country, a voting district in the entire nation, that has more than 15% support for cutting Medicaid.
It's so funny because I was like, I know I've heard that when I came across this, and I realized you said it last week. But I couldn't help but to think when we were talking about the Democrats having two people who have passed away, and thus the bill only passing the House by one vote, I also was struck by the idea, with that knowledge, SNAP being included in that bill in the way that it is like a suicide for Republicans. I have one of those in Representative Michael Baumgarten, who, uh, um, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when those are the numbers that we're seeing across all of the congressional voting districts, how come not a single person is willing to break to say, like, this doesn't represent who I was voted in office to represent?
Can I repeat something else that I said last week?
Sure.
And you don't have to do the conspiracy theory alarm, but
Okay.
pretend it's here. It's because they don't think there's going to be any more elections. They don't think they're going to be held accountable. They think they now have permanent rule.
I'm not sure everybody is there.
I think enough of them are.
Hmm.
I think enough are that no one will break ranks with them, which is devastating. Like,
I just
who
want to
becomes a? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, like, so then why is Donald Trump, for example, talking about a third term if there isn't going to be a need for elections?
Because that would be his third term.
He is
It would
going
still
to.
be a
Why is he
4-year
saying
term.
he is
No one
going?
would vote for him.
Hmm.
I don't want to. I don't want to be a crazy person like this, but it is the only thing that makes sense to me. Like, oh, Donald Trump will just ignore what the Supreme Court says because give it a year or two and he'll have consolidated enough power that he can just get rid of the Supreme Court altogether.
I mean, that works.
Then he can just get rid of Congress.
Well, I mean, I've heard this like a million times, and like, I suppose that works. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I am concerned about that. I don't think it's going to work that way. I think they're going to continue to disenfranchise voters, but I don't think there's going to be a general, we're not having an election like that. I don't see happening. And in relation to what I was talking about, like within congressional districts, I don't believe that Republicans or frankly Democrats or whoever believes that in like less than 4 years, voting for my rep in my congressional district is not going to go to vote. That is hard for me to wrap my head around. Like a first term representative in the state of Washington within like 200 days is basing what his political aspirations are on the idea that there's not going to be elections anymore. I don't believe that's what he's operating as. I actually think he's operating and thinking that he's representing people who quote unquote mandated for the administration, and that he doesn't have an understanding that he has a basic misunderstanding of that there are people who think differently than him in his own congressional district, which I think is a failure just of politicians in general. We see that on both sides, but I I I I have a really hard time like boiling down like local politics into the idea that like everybody in the entire political game is running on the notion that the elections are over.
And yes, I agree. It is obviously an absurd theory until it's not.
Well, all theories are okay. I don't want to get too far into this. And I guess what you're saying is the reason why nobody can stand up to this is because I think what you're saying is nobody believes that they are going to be challenged on it. And I don't think if that's the case, like, I don't know why we're talking about any of this stuff, because I I tend to think that when you see things happening at town halls, I think when this bill comes to passage, it's going to piss off a lot of people. I know it's going to piss off a lot of people locally. And I think there's a good chance this guy does not get his that he's a one-term guy around here. That does not mean that I don't believe that we have fully started to slide into fascism and authoritarianism, but I just don't understand how, like, you've got people like Rand Paul who's losing his mind over this bill. And I guess my question is that he's on all of the talk shows and he's saying things like the emperor has no clothes, which sound really good. And I guess my question is will he end up voting for it anyway? And why do people keep doing this? And I guess what you're saying is because they don't think they're threatened. They're not threatened by anything.
Well, and so I guess my thought behind it is either one of two things has happened. One is the American people are so burnt out on this already 150 or so days in that we're not doing things like calling our Congress people. If you want to give this first term congressman the benefit of the doubt that he really thinks that he is representing what his constituents believe, we can do that. But then shame on all of his constituents for not telling him otherwise. And yes, there are Congress people holding town halls and kicking people out of them because they disagree. Like, there is something so viciously anti-democratic happening right now. And I cannot come to any other conclusion. And I hope that you're right. I hope that we have a couple more, midterm elections. We have a midterm election and this starts to reset itself. But I don't know how much faith I have in that right now.
Well, I mean, in this situation, I've called him. I mean, I pretty much everybody I know has been calling this guy for the past couple of months. He's getting lambasted locally in the press. On this specific topic of SNAP, people have been really adamant to point out that he lives in like a very, very cozy, nice part of town, which is literally the heartbeat of blue Spokane. And he's a guy who I think generally is really naive and truly is starting to understand that constituencies are complicated, because an area has been red traditionally, does not make you very popular if you are line in step with the administration on issues that are going to help, poor and disadvantaged people. I mean, there's a lot of rural people living around here, and I think that what it is that he's trying to, and again, this is giving him more credit maybe he deserves, but I think he's coming to the realization that this might be a lot harder than he thought. What I don't understand is that people with political aspirations, um, uh, that no one's brave enough to just kind of be like, nah, this is it, snap, and my area is important and I'm not voting for this. And it wouldn't even really necessarily be, I don't know how much of a big issue that would be. Well, I mean, I guess if it threw the bill, it would be a big issue, but I would think that that would also give you some political clout. Because it seems like the people that aren't the people that are most against this bill, unfortunately, have a lot of political clout in ways that I wish they didn't.
Yeah. And when you look at what happens to people like Liz Cheney or Adam, Adam Kissinger, but it's not Kissinger, obviously. Kinzinger, is that his name?
Let's try to get this right. I feel kind of bad. Adam Kinzinger. Yes, that's right.
I mean, they stood their ground and they gave up their political careers for it. And that was in the diet fascism of yesteryear. Yeah, no, I am absolutely appalled. And the other thing about bills like this is they always do things over an extended period of time. So, like, these cuts happen over the course of 5 or 10 years. So that way, when the midterms come around, no one's really felt it yet.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I can't get over the idea that I think this particular bill, it's going to be historical. I don't know any other way to think about it. It is such a blatant example of the wealth disparagement in this country. You know, I keep going back to like, we're already at like French Revolutionary levels of wealth distribution in this country, and then we force through a bill like this, and I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe it's the AI bubble has to collapse, or maybe this market has to. I don't know what it's going to take, but
Well, the good news is Mitch McConnell is
yeah.
not on board with this bill.
Oh,
Um, and who was the other one? Rand Paul
yeah, Rand
is
Paul.
not on board with this bill. So it will likely not pass in the Senate. Although I say that, you have the John Fetterman and Kirsten Sinema of it all. So it's going to be really dicey in the Senate. I it's so frustrating because like the problem is our reality is so insane, like you couldn't sell it as a movie plot because it would be too fantastical. So, I mean, really, ideally, the moral of this story is stock up on your sex toys now, put them in a safe. Because there is a big important thing that we could talk about. Let's just make an acknowledgement that it is 5 years since George Floyd was killed, and that this current administration is doing everything to undo the settlements that the Biden administration put in place with Louisville and Minneapolis, St. Paul, to work on rectifying the deaths of George Floyd in Minneapolis and Breonna Taylor in Louisville. The administration's already done it. Like they've already said no more. It was against their DEI policies. We did see in 2020, like what we are capable of if we band together. And the problem is we have to band together and stay together. I hope that we find that in us soon. Again.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to think back to that time because it was really difficult because we were, you know, in the pandemic. I guess I should say in the beginnings of the pandemic. As heartbreaking as the George Floyd story was, the energy and like the sense of optimism, maybe it was a combination of being shut in for a couple of months, but I remember going to a couple days of the George Floyd protest here in Spokane, and it being like, I remember going home and feeling a sense of like community and like hope.
Yep.
And I don't have that same feeling now. And there, again, it's, I'm not trying to equate like George Floyd to now. They're completely different moments in time and history. But I think like in terms of the passion and the reaction to the situation, it feels different now. And I also can't believe that was 5 years ago. And I found myself kind of thinking about what actual change did that make. It's heartbreaking to see what the Trump administration is doing and how they're trying to reframe all of this just on a local level. Like I was, you know, Spokane is consistently one of the top three, ranked as one of the top three deadliest um, police departments by population.
Really?
We were number 2 in 2024, I think, at the end of the year. Now, this is based on population.
Sure, but still.
So we're usually in the top 10, and we're still hovering around the top 3. And earlier this year, there's kind of a local, not a local, but a conversation going on with the Spokane Police Department that was, is lethal force a de-escalation technique? And I remember thinking, God, that's where we're at.
Well, and it's very hard because I mean, how many of us who went to protests were furloughed or laid off from our jobs because of COVID? Like, I can't go to protests unless they're on a weekend now because I have a job. I can't lose my job, but then I lose my house. Like, it was such a weird, perfect moment. Like, it was the perfect storm of a bunch of people who had nothing else to do and the right story to infuriate people. And now, like, we should be burning down buildings over what's happening to Adriana Smith. We should be burning down buildings to try and free the man in Cincinnati who ran over a cop because a cop killed his son. Like, we should be doing this all the time, but we can't because we have jobs and mortgages or rent, and grocery bills are higher than ever. And who has time when you're working 3 jobs? Again, not to give them so much credit, but all of that feels very deliberate. I mean, it's going to take something pretty insane, I think, to get the level of community commitment that we got in 2020.
Yeah, I was listening to something on NPR. I think it was NPR. They were covering like the neighborhood in which George Floyd was killed in, and how there is a nonprofit that has been working with the police department since that time, be representative of the concerns people have about their local police officers. I mean, for obvious reason, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got one of the largest social uprisings in American history that started in your neighborhood, and there's a lot of distrust between the local residents and the police department. Sometimes I baffle at NPR. I understand they have to frame it to apparently the listener who has been living in a cave for 100 years, but they were like, why do you think it's necessary for you to do this? And the woman was like, because they're scared of the cops.
Right.
It's like, duh. And that interview is happening this week at the same time where, this administration is considering, I mean, there's no other way to say there's no other way to look at this other than to say that it's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing behind it other than to say cops can do whatever they want.
If you give the police carte blanche to do whatever they want, what happens if we want to have another uprising? What happens if we want to protest? What happens if we want to start doing the things that we need to do to get our democracy back? The police can just kill us all.
Well, on that note,
I want to talk about something silly.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the movie The Conjuring?
I have not.
Okay, so The Conjuring is the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are professional paranormal investigators, crypto somethings, and also exorcists. I don't know. They're fun movies.
Yeah, I looked this up. Ed, I believe, was a demonologist, which I did not know that term existed until today.
Imagine if I would have spent the money I spent on college majoring in history to major in demonology. Is that a major? I hope so. I hope there are kids out there getting just absolutely bullshit degrees in demonology right now. I just love that for them. And his wife was a medium. I don't remember if she's still alive. I think she is.
She's not. They're both dead.
Oh, are they?
I better check that. I don't want to be killing people off, especially not demonologists.
So a little bit of that movie features a doll
Right.
that in the movie is very creepy, but in real life just looks like a Raggedy Ann doll, and its name is Annabelle, and it is supposedly haunted. And a few years ago, Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures purchased said doll. Now, Ed and Lorraine Warren, I don't know how much of any of this I believe, but we're very adamant that that doll not leave their estate because it is dangerous, according to them. But Zach Bagans, who reminds me of every absolute moron I went to high school with, and he actually went to high school like 30 miles from where I grew up, so it tracks, is now touring this doll around the United States. Now, last week, the doll was in New Orleans, and I'm not sure if you saw what happened in New Orleans, but an entire ass plantation burned to the ground, and so did Marie Laveau's home in New Orleans, which, if you are familiar with that, she was an absolutely terrible woman who abused and tortured people of color, like a terrible person, but her house caught on fire as well. And then the rumor started circulating that the doll was missing, which sent the internet into a tizzy.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us were hoping it got FedExed to the White House. It did not, unfortunately. It is not missing. Annabelle is just being toured around in some private locations, not open to the public. So, very weird, kind of creepy story. But honestly, probably like the most realistic thing I can think of that would happen this week.
This story's fascinating on a lot of levels. I'm not a big horror movie fan, but it's amazing how many movies this doll was cited as a part inspiration for. I also am looking at this Daily Mail article where it says, the article is titled, "I'm a haunted doll collector. Here's why the infamous Annabelle toy should not be on tour." And it has a photo of a girl who looks like she's like 15 and is a TikTok. She's got 54 haunted dolls. I love this quote from her. Um, we don't even know Annabelle's true story. We owe it only to her, not only to her, but to all spirits to start asking the real questions and getting evidence on who they are and what happened to them. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway.
Listen, I was raised Catholic, so I have a surface level belief in a lot of those things, and I'm kind of superstitious. And I do believe that, you know, if we are made of energy, sometimes that energy doesn't go somewhere. Like generally, it should just disperse, and sometimes it doesn't. And I have no problem wrapping my head around that. But like, I mean, come on. Also, if I'm wrong and this doll is so powerful, bring it to freaking Congress. Like, let's get the show on the road. What are we doing? What are we waiting for?
I mean, I guess it kind of relates to what you said, but like when we ask Annabelle, what's her story? What are we expecting this doll's story to be?
Also, it's a doll. Do you think she's going to tell you? Is she also a ventriloquist dummy? No. What are we doing?
I have no idea.
Man, it is exhausting to be an American these days.
That's just a humanity one. I don't blame that one just on us. That seems like something the UK would be very capable of also.
Well, there was a Conjuring 2 that took place in London, so yeah.
Yeah, there you go. See?
I love horror movies and I love that entire franchise, but I think the more you watch the movies, you realize how silly the whole thing is. And now that we're trying to make it a real thing, it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
First of all, James Wan would never. But second of all, like, either do something powerful with it or go put it back in a box somewhere.
Well, I think the original story I read about it too is the doll was originally a college student who was researching demonology's doll, and it was given to Ed and Lorraine. So it's secondhand knowledge, frankly, that Ed and Lorraine have that this doll is cursed or evil.
So I don't know how accurate it is to like the reality of it, but the opening of The Conjuring of the first movie It's supposed to tell the story of Annabelle's origin. Now, there are also Annabelle movies that I have not seen, and I haven't seen the Nun movies because that face terrifies me.
Well, I guess this is the question of whether what's more realistic, Wikipedia or The Conjuring.
Well, I mean, The Conjuring is supposed to be based on a true story. Like,
Yeah, I was reading apparently what the true story was on Wikipedia, though.
well, so it was a college student, but it wasn't, it was a group of college students and they were nurses. And the doll showed up one day, and one of the students was like, "Am I getting this mixed up with another movie?"
I think you are. Yeah.
Damn, I might be, because The Nurses, I think, was an American Horror Story episode. Now I'm way off base.
Yeah.
We gotta circle back.
Yeah.
I've lost the thread.
Annabelle just wanted to be a nurse. That's the story.
She just wanted to help people.
Yeah, totally.
And I mean, really, she's burning down plantations. She is helping.
She is. True.
Good for her. You go, girl.
Well, I found this story that it was the most inspiring thing I read all week. Tells you a lot about my week. The story I found on 404 Media was penguin poop helps Antarctica stay cool. That's pretty much the story. Although I did like the intro to this. We begin this week with some scatological salvation. Do you know what scatological is?
To do with scat?
Kind of. That is the study and or obsession with feces and or excrement.
Gross.
So I didn't know that. I had to look that up and went, oh. I looked that in demonology up today, and I was like, I mean, I kind of knew what demonology was going to be, but I didn't know. Anyway.
I mean, I feel like this is why we can't ban sex toys.
Right.
Because shit's gonna get real weird.
So I'll read this. This opening line of the story is a whopper. It says, the path to a more stable climate in Antarctica runs through the buttholes of penguins.
Yes.
Penguin guano, the copious excrement produced by the birds, is rich in ammonia and methylene gas. So these gases stimulate particle formulation that leads to clouds and aerosols, which in turn cool temperatures in the region. So as I read this story and goes on and on, it basically says that all of this penguin poop, basically it spikes up the ammonia concentration over 1,000 times the regular baseline. So when these penguins roll into these areas in Antarctica and they poop a lot, basically like these guano hotspots act as a resistance against climate change in Antarctica. I think that's the easiest way to put it.
Good for them. Good for those penguins. I did watch a video. I don't remember where, probably on TikTok, about someone who went to Australia, like or Antarctica, not Australia, to Antarctica as a tourist. And she said the first thing you notice is how terrible it smells because of the penguins.
Interesting.
Because it's so much ammonia. Like, that's what you smell.
Wow.
So, I mean, good to them, but maybe some Febreze too.
Yeah. Febreze icy mist.
Antarctic chip.
There we go. There we go. Thanks for listening to the Don't Walk Into Traffic podcast. We are a podcast with new episodes each week. You can follow us on our social media channels at DWITpod on both X/Twitter and Blue Sky. There you will find links to the topics and the stories we discussed, amongst other things. Like to touch base, you can also send us an email at dwitpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening to the Don't Walk Into Traffic podcast, and see you next week. Bye-bye.